for this assignment, I will be telling you the hidden history of Bhutanese Nepali people in America. The story starts in Bhutan in the 1900s, or actually starts in Nepal in the 1900s. So essentially, in Nepal, there was a big earthquake, and this earthquake caused a lot of Nepali people to migrate to Bhutan because they had lost their land and their homes, so they needed to go somewhere to live. Um, and Nepali people weren't necessarily accepted into Bhutan because they were considered as outsiders or illegals. Um, and because of that, uh, they were seen as second-class citizens, and they weren't given rights. So a lot of my grandparents, my parents, they didn't really have a lot of wealth, and they weren't allowed to be educated. So Nepali people would just they lived in Bhutan for about I think up until 1960. And at that point, what happened was Nepali people were being forced to assimilate into Buddhism and uh, live in sort of adhere to Bhutanese clothings and their cultures, but Nepali people didn't want to do that because they already had their developed cultures and customs and Hinduism, and this caused a civil war between Nepalis and the Bhutanese government, and this basically resulted in the deportation of Nepali people, and then they were deported back to Nepal. But when they got to Nepal, it had been like 60 years since they had gone to Bhutan. So these are like essentially my parents when they were little. My parents were little when they were sort of deported. But the Nepali government was like, you guys are not Nepali because you were gone for 6 decades, right? So because of that, the Nepali government did let them in, but they didn't give them citizenship or any rights. So they were forced to live in like camps. And in the end, I think at the age of, and after my parents were like in their mid-20s, they met, and then they had me and my little brother. And as I sort of explore my life in Nepal, I would say that it wasn't totally bad, right? I lived in Nepal for about 9 years, and for the most part, it was pretty good. I have really fond memories uh, of playing with my friends. Going to school and learning ABCs and learning how to write in Nepali and reading stories and drawing. And overall, my childhood was pretty good in Nepal. But something that being in Nepal taught me was that it was really hard because there weren't a lot of facilities. There was only one hospital for like a city with 10,000 people. And there wasn't good irrigation systems. Water was dirty, and everyone in the camp was poor, right? No one really had wealth. And but even then, I didn't really realize how bad it was because I was too busy being a kid, I guess. So I think in 2007 or 8, there was a program called IOM, which was essentially just taking Bhutanese people, like refugees like us, to America, Australia, and Europe, right? So I think in 2009, my parents did the paperwork, and after a few months, we were in Minnesota. And I still remember coming to America. It was, being in the plane for the first time and flying over New York. It was such a euphoric memory, right? Because everyone in the camp was sold of the idea that America was this great place, a place of liberation. And I did feel a sense of liberation. I wouldn't say it was liberation, but happiness when I came here. That was because, I was able to do things and have things that I otherwise necessarily didn't have back home. And also because I was a bit naive. I wasn't really aware of the social structures or the racial structures in America because I was kind of too busy being a kid. And the school that I went to as a kid was predominantly people of color, so I didn't really feel like an outsider when I came to America. But I was kind of shocked that there were a lot of people that looked like me when I thought it would be just a lot of white people, right? But I didn't really think about it too much, and I did feel a sense of acceptance being in elementary school. But it was only from middle school to high school when I moved to Roseville that I realized that America was in midst of like a racial crisis in a way. Moving to Roseville made me realize how much of an outsider I was, because um, there weren't. It just makes you look at, sort of see the whiteness in America, right? And how you aren't really accepted, because at that point, after moving to Roseville and growing up a little bit, you sort of watch the news. Um, and as someone who identifies as a Bhutanese, Nepali, Asian American, I am in a way made to sort of go through the same struggles that my parents were facing when they were kids in Bhutan, right? Where they were systematically oppressed in a way. And granted, life here isn't as oppressive as it was in Nepal or in Bhutan. You can't deny the oppression in America. And as an Asian American, and in this current time, the Asian hate is super magnified, right? You see Asian people being brutalized and attacked. But I think it's also important for us to realize that Asian people are a vast group of communities, and I just wanted to shed light on the fact that of the Bhutanese narrative, because this is a narrative that isn't often told in regards to Asian Americans, right? And I'm offering this perspective because I think it's really important in the midst of the crisis that's happening right now with Asian hate, because I want to sort of send a message that Asian Americans are a group of super diverse people, right? And that hating us isn't necessarily going to change anything in this country. And I think it's really important for me as an Asian American to find my identity as an Asian American, because you just get grouped into China, Japan, Korea, and India, right? Besides that, people don't really talk about anything else. So I just wanted to explore my history and the racial structures in America, as well as underlying the fact that Asian Americans are a vast group of people. And I tell the story because of what's happening in the news and media, and I think it's essential that as an Asian American that I tell my story, so that it can bring a sense of humanness to Asian Americans, because right now this country is viewing us as diseases, as outsiders, and as foreigners. But we have contributed a lot to this country. And I think that in order for us to overcome these barriers, that we must tell our stories. So thank you for listening to this brief story and history, and I hope you enjoyed. As I explore my story, I want you guys to realize that human suffering and oppression are key elements of humanity, and in a way they have shaped my life. And with that, I wanna urge you guys to stand against hate of all kind, and stand up against the hate that this media in this country is, I guess, showing towards Asian Americans.